Okay, let's dive in. You've sent over this fascinating stack of sources, mostly excerpts from a particular book.
That's right. And the idea today is to really get into these pages. They drop us right into England just before and then during the start of World War One.
And we're seeing it mostly through the eyes of an American visitor and his English host, right?
Exactly. We get to know Mr. Britling, who's the host. He's a writer, a thinker, kind of grappling with everything changing around him.
And then there's Mr. Direck, the American guest. He's observing contrasting things with his own background.
And the whole lively, slightly chaotic household around them at this place called Matching's Easy.
It sounds like quite the journey. We go from these, quirky cultural observations and that pre-war tension.
All the way to the really devastating impact the war has on their lives, their thinking, their whole worldview. It's quite a shift.
It's a powerful way to look at history. So let's start right at the beginning with Mr. Direck arriving. What jumps out from the sources about that?
Well, the first thing is how consciously American he's trying to be. The sources say he wants to appear visibly and audibly America eyewitnessing.
How so?
Even his clothes, tailor-made in New York. Apparently, it works so well a London taxi driver mistakes shillings on the meter for dollars. Politely, of course.
Huh, that's quite something. Sets a tone. But then, when he actually gets out into the countryside, he's surprised.
Yeah, it's a bit of a paradox. He sees the thatched cottages, the creaking inn signs, even a fat vicar in a governess cart.
Classic old England stuff.
Exactly. And he notes it feels less like reality and more like, his words, traveling in literature.
Like stepping into a book.
Precisely. He specifically compares it to Washington Irving's England, or later, Mrs. Humphrey Ward's. He's arriving in a kind of preconceived literary landscape.
So expectation versus reality from the get-go. And his first meeting with Mr. Britling isn't exactly formal either.
Not at all. Britling meets him at the station, and the very first thing he says, pointing at some plants, is, "Did you ever see such peas, Mr. Dick?"
Peas. Not world affairs, not introductions, but peas.
And Direck's, apparently adopting what the source calls a good old farmer hayseed kind of voice, just replies, "My word."
Even the station master gets involved.
Chimes in about it being a rare year for sweet peas.
Yeah.
It just sets this very specific, almost pastoral, slightly unassuming English scene immediately.
A very particular kind of welcome. Definitely contrasts with Direck's intentional Americanness.
A really distinct start. And speaking of unexpected, that car ride from the station sounds, well, terrifying based on the description.
Oh yeah, what happened?
Well, first off, Britling admits it's only the third time he's ever driven the car.
Oh dear. That's not promising.
Not really. He stalls it trying to get into high gear. Then he nearly hits a baker's cart.
Nearly hits it.
His explanation is priceless. "I pressed the accelerator instead of the brake. One does it first." And then he claims he missed by less than a foot, though the source doubts that.
Wow. So, near miss, blames the pedals, downplays the danger, and he kept going in circles too.
Apparently. He calls it the bicycle habit. You forget to straighten the wheels after turning. He says the instruction book explains it, but he forgot.
Right.
Eventually, he figures out, I can reverse out of this, all while Mr. Direck is apparently too anxious to say a word.
You can picture poor Mr. Direck just gripping the seat. So this arrival sequence, the literary ideas, the chaotic drive, it really throws the Americans' kind of prepared attitude against this messy English reality.
Absolutely. It's not the smooth efficiency he might have expected. And that sets up another contrast the sources highlight pretty quickly.
Which is?
American ingenuity versus maybe British tradition, or even a bit of resistance to modern ways.
How does that come up?
Britling himself observes it. He talks about American cars as a product of tremendous organizing ability, how Americans standardize things, machine them wholesale.
Like clocks and watches and rifles.
Exactly. While the British, he feels, are still making things one by one.
And he sees that as a negative thing.
It comes across as a lament, yeah. He feels England, even though it started the industrial system, has sort of fallen away from doing things systematically.
Is there a specific example?
Oh, the best one is about electricity. Britling describes British electricity as that high-grade, useless, long sparking stuff you get by turning round a glass machine.
You mean static electricity? From school experiments?
Basically, he says you keep it in Leyden jars. not the kind that powers things. And he mentions this place, Claverings, where there was a huge row because tenants weren't allowed to install electric bells.
The electric bells caused a row. Seriously.
It shows this like stubborn resistance to practical modern stuff in some quarters. It's a mindset.
And Mr. Direck just politely agrees.
Yeah, he notes it forms a very marked contrast indeed with the sort of thing that goes on in America. Very diplomatic.
So you got the American arriving, expecting one kind of tradition, the literary kind, but finding this other practical, maybe inefficient tradition instead. That's neat.
It is. And his next challenge is just figuring out the people in the Britling house. The source calls it a perplexing company.
You can't work out who everyone is.
Pretty much. At dinner, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Britling are at the ends. The barefoot boys are clearly sons. But beyond that, it's a cloud of uncertainty.
Who else is there?
He spots a pale young man with a pram, guesses, Teddy, maybe a secretary, an old lady with a noble nose, a tall young man, Mr. Rayburn, a distinguished dark young man, Mr. Filbert Direck guesses maybe a minister.
A minister, like clergy.
Yeah, which turns out to be right. Then there's Herr Heinrich, the German tutor, Miss Corner, who's called Cecily, and someone named Letty. It's all cast.
And this lack of clear roles is part of the point.
Seems like it. Herr Heinrich actually comments on it later. He says in Germany, everything is definite. Every man knows his place. It directly contrasts with the maybe more fluid setup at the Britlings.
Another national comparison drawn from observation. But Direck does find some common ground, doesn't he, in an odd way?
Yeah, with one of the babies. He tries out some American jokes, mentioning characters called Maud and Buster. He's genuinely thrilled when one of the infants actually reacts, apparently saying, "Maud's a treat!" A little moment of cross-cultural connection.
That's sweet. And there's another connection he makes with Miss Corner.
Ah, yes, that's lovely. He discovers she's a Corner, just like his own grandmother's cousin back home. He even thinks she looks like a miniature portrait he has of that cousin.
Wow, a family link across the ocean.
Exactly. And his reaction is pure Direck friendly, a bit bold. He just blurts out, "I'm very pleased to meet you, Cousin Corner. How are the old folks at home?"
That cuts through all the observing and analyzing.
It really does. These early bits really set the scene. The characters, this specific English world, the national differences, all seen through Derek's eyes. It feels quite stable, if a bit quirky.
But, beneath that surface of peas and peculiar households, the sources start showing these political currents, right? Hints of the trouble brewing in Europe.
Absolutely. We meet Lady Frencham, who sounds like quite a character, forceful personality. She's convinced Ireland is on the very verge of civil war.
Declaring it will be civil war.
Exactly. And she's annoyed that writers like Britling are doing nothing to prevent it.
So that immediately grounds us in the pre-war internal British tensions. How does Britling respond?
With this kind of weary detachment almost. A plague on both your parties, he says.
Why that attitude?
His view, maybe reflecting a wider feeling then, is that the whole system just looks as though it was bound to go on steadily forever. They can't really imagine fundamental change anymore.
That sense of permanence, almost complacency, right before the roof falls in.
That contrast is vital. You have the Irish issue simmering, this general feeling of stability, and then Herr Heinrich, the German guest, brings in the external threat.
With that quiet prediction.
Yeah, very stark, very clinical. He just states, it is probable to be war between Austria and Serbia, and that Russia may make war on Austria.
Just lays it out there. But Britling doesn't buy it initially.
No, he kind of dismisses it. He thinks the situation's too plain, too obvious for war to actually happen. Unless, he adds, Germany wants a universal war.
He still has faith in common sense prevailing.
Yeah, he talks about the sound common sense of ordinary Germans, even the emperor. He sees the military stuff as just theater, basically. He believes peace will hold.
That's a crucial insight from the source, isn't it? How even thoughtful people could underestimate the danger right up until the last minute.
Definitely. Preferring to believe in stability over the warning signs.
It makes you think. So amidst these political rumblings, life at Matching ZZ carries on with its own sort of social rituals and quirks.
Oh, yes. The sources are full of little details, like Mr. Direck noticing the servants don't wear livery, which surprises him because of American magazines and films.
Another reality check for him. And the parties and games sound lively.
There's a dance party where Teddy decides shirts are optional for dancing, and Mr. Direck gets into the spirit, making a costume from green curtain material.
Green curtain material.
And Sissy is watching Teddy with affectionate admiration. Miss Corner is surprised Direck can't two-step, but it sounds, cheerfully informal.
And Sunday hockey. That sounds like pure chaos.
It's described as combining danger, physical exercise, and kindliness. Makeshift teams called landwehr. And Aunt Wilshire parks the baby's pram near the goal for maximum danger.
Near the goal, with the baby in it.
Apparently, her reasoning later is the goal sticks offer a sort of protection. It's completely mad, but presented matter-of-factly. Rayburn is yelling, calling Sissy a rabbit.
It sounds like a scene from a slightly surreal film. And there's a dramatic moment in the game.
Very dramatic. Sissy makes a dash, gets the ball, dodges Rayburn, then Mr. Direck takes a shot, hits the pram wheel, by a kind of miracle, wakes the baby, and one of the younger Britlings just declares, "That's game."
That's brilliant. It's such a perfect snapshot of that specific, slightly eccentric, energetic, pre-war English life.
Exactly. It paints the world that's just about to be completely overturned, and the sources show that shift starting personally with Herr Heinrich.
His anxiety starts growing.
Yeah, he gets more and more uneasy listening for news, convinced war is coming. He says, "Russia will mobilize. And then Germany will mobilize, and all my holiday will vanish." That personal worry is the first real crack.
And then it happens, he gets called up.
Just like that. I have to go. He has to find an address in Bloomsbury to sort out getting back to Germany. The description of his packed room is really moving.
What does it say?
It calls it touching, symbolical, and prophetic. The miniature of one small life uprooted. It really brings home the human cost of what's starting.
And while this personal drama unfolds, the village is having a festival.
Incredible contrast, isn't it? A local fair, balloon race, coconut shy. Aunt Wilshire apparently wins 27 coconuts.
27. Only Aunt Wilshire.
But then, the source says, across the sunshine of this artless festival, the news breaks, like writing showing through a picture.
What news?
France invaded by Germany, Germany invaded by Russia. Stark, abrupt.
Wow. The coconuts and the headlines side by side. That perfectly captures the suddenness of it all. The improbable war is here.
And its reality comes crashing back to Matching's Easy with Mr. Durick's sudden return.
He comes back. Why?
Because, as he puts it, Europe is dislocated. His own trip was a disaster, lost luggage, useless money, even got arrested for having English gold.
Arrest?
Briefly. But what really struck him was the German attitude, this sort of solemn enthusiasm, high and low.
And he brings a warning back to England.
A stark one. He tells them, you have no idea here yet how completely Europe is dislocated. It's a whole country in arms. He bursts any bubbles they might have had, telling them the British Expeditionary Force is already retreating, saying Liège, which maybe felt like a victory, was just a scratch on the paint.
Oof, that must have hit hard. How does Britling take it?
It shatters him. The source describes him stunned, staring at maps, his easy optimism just collapsing. The war becomes real, immediate, crushing.
You see the effects ripple through the household.
Instantly. Even in small things. Mrs. Britling has trouble getting basic supplies. She admits, one gets carried away a little. I just got, what was it? Cerebos salt. Even salt becomes an issue.
And the boys playing war games. Chilling.
Well, Mr. Britling finds he just can't work. He's thinking about the economy collapsing, the tremendous change in values, the moratorium, the local grocer suddenly wary of checks.
A foundation shaking.
Yeah.
But Britling finds some kind of opportunity in this.
Paradoxically, yes. He starts to see it not just as a catastrophe, but also as potentially the greatest opportunity in history.
Opportunity. How?
He thinks it's a chance to get the best out of this tremendous fusing up of all the settled things of life. The old world is burning. Maybe something better can rise from the ashes.
That's a huge shift in perspective.
Yeah.
But this new reality also fuels criticism of the British war effort, right?
Yeah.
Voiced by Britling.
Oh, absolutely. He gets increasingly frustrated. The sources detail his anger at the War Office's inefficiency with recruits.
What kind of inefficiency?
He sees outright hostility to older volunteers, mentions a 54-year-old marcher, a 38-year-old eager to learn shooting, both basically turned away or obstructed.
He feels the leadership is out of touch.
Completely. Calls it a small army under a clique government. People up there who don't get manufacturing don't get ordinary English life.
Oh, what's his solution?
He thinks, this is our war, the nation's war. The people need to take hold of the government that it had neglected so long. He hopes for change from within without revolution.
But he sees problems hindering that.
Yeah, he observes this bickering futility, a collapse of the initial energy, this obsession with finding spies and traitors everywhere.
Except the highest, he notes.
Exactly, and he makes this harsh comparison. England and Russia are twin, slack, gigantic nations, lacking Germany's unity, discipline, science.
How does he describe the fighting?
Critically, as a stupid thrusting forth of men and yet more men. Men badly trained, under-equipped, stupidly led. It's a raw internal critique of the early war effort presented in these sources.
It really captures that internal disillusionment, running alongside the external fight. And then the sources take us right to the front lines through Hugh Britling's letters.
Yes, and they provide such a stark personal view. Hugh writes that life is mostly waiting about and going through duties.
Not very heroic.
Not how he describes it. He even dislikes the idea of promotion, says he could never take the high line needed for a corporal, prefers writing silly verses and drawing caricatures.
But it gives details of trench life.
Vivid, often grim ones, carrying sandbags at night, fearing the white glare of a searchlight, hearing the guns a kind of thud at the stomach.
What about the landscape?
Desolate, flat, featureless. He describes damaged poplar trees looking like the end of a cane that has been broken and twisted. Powerful image.
Are there lighter moments?
Mentions a village inn with a poor, weary billiard table. But mostly it's grim reality. Seeing a German plane shot down, falling like dropping a knife. Seeing dead soldiers, little twisted figures.
Does it change his view of the war?
Completely. Any initial sense of it being a game vanishes. He regains his original amazement at the whole business. Starts asking what we're really up to, why the war began.
How does he describe it then?
He uses this shocking comparison, like watching a madman jabbing with a toasting fork. Utterly senseless.
And the sources include some really dark details.
They do, like body fishing in no man's land called a curious sport, or a literal tug-of-war over a dead body while sharpshooters fire. Horrific.
And then there's a personal loss for him.
Deeply personal. He describes a friend, his little cockney cad, just dying in the trench, fainted and fluttered out. Hugh's reaction is just raw grief. I began to cry like a baby. I didn't want him to be out of it.
These letters bring the human cost right into focus, away from the politics and critiques back home.
Absolutely essential for understanding the full picture, and that cost soon hits the Britling circle with devastating force. The sources recount loss after loss.
First, Teddy.
Yes. News of Teddy's death arrives. Letty's reaction is this cold indignation with the War Office. She feels they're keeping something back. Mr. Direck tries to comfort her.
And then here Heinrich.
News comes that he died as a wounded prisoner in Russia. Beaten by other prisoners, apparently. Died hoping for his violin and the international language he believed in.
God, that's bleak.
The source underlines it. Just one of a multitude of such links snapping. The connections of the old world breaking.
And finally, the news about Hugh.
Yes. The source describes Mr. Britling getting the telegram, his physical reaction feeling very sick and strained. His wife just asking, what is it?
And his reply.
Just a whisper. My Hugh. The telegram crumples to the floor. It's incredibly stark. No melodrama, just the crushing weight of it.
That loss must trigger a profound crisis for Britling.
It absolutely does. It leads to intense grief, but also this deep philosophical struggle, a search for meaning.
Does he just blame the Germans?
Initially, yes. Pure rage. Devils they are. But that shifts. He starts seeing them not as devils, but as, sinful men of, nature with himself, hard, stupid, caught in the same web.
He tries to understand their character.
A bit. He thinks they're unsubtle, prone to moral indignation, which he sees as the root of most cruelty. But his questioning goes much deeper than that.
Existential questions.
Big ones. Is the whole scheme of nature evil? Is life itself, in its essence, cruel? Does God even exist?
And if God does?
If God exists and could prevent this suffering, but doesn't, Britling says he'd spit in his empty face. It's raw anger and disillusionment with traditional ideas of God.
So where does his thinking go from there? This is fascinating.
He rejects the idea of an all-powerful God who just owns all nature, separate from it.
Instead,
he develops this idea that God is within nature and necessity.
Within it, not controlling it.
Right, and he sees necessity, the harsh realities, the randomness, the cruelty as a thing beyond God. God isn't the puppet master. God is also struggling.
Struggling how?
Struggling in you and in me and in Germany and in Russia and in France and in Flanders. God is fighting his way out of the universe alongside humanity.
Wow. That's a really unconventional theology born out of immense suffering. Not God as a distant king, but as a fellow struggler.
Exactly. It's a powerful reimagining. And amidst all this intense thinking, the source shows him finding comfort in shared grief, particularly with Letty.
Because they both lost someone close.
Yes, they've been stricken by the same thing. They understood how it was with each other. They talk about Hugh and Teddy, sometimes feeling they're just around the corner. That shared understanding brings solace.
And he reflects on Hugh specifically.
With deep admiration, he remembers Hugh's extraordinary fineness, calls him a creature of the most delicate and rapid responses. Grief here isn't just crushing, it forces this deep introspection and reevaluation.
It's a complex picture of how loss reshapes belief.
A very profound transformation.
And ultimately, Britling tries to channel all this, the grief, the questions, the new ideas, into his writing.
Yes. He finds his old work, like a piece called And Now War Ends, feels totally superficial. He can't go back to it.
So he plans something new.
A new book, tentatively called Anatomy of Hate, trying to understand the roots of it all.
Trying to make sense through intellect. And there's that letter he writes.
The letter to Herr Heinrich's parents. It's a key moment. He knows his style might be tin pot, but he feels he has to write. Not just as himself, but as England bereaved to Germany bereaved.
Reaching across the trenches of grief, what's his message?
Very direct. The war must end, and nobody else but you and me and all of us can end it. It's a call for shared human responsibility.
Does he blame Germany in the letter?
He contrasts what Germany could have achieved peacefully, suggesting they could have conquered the world through influence with half the energy and intelligence you have spent upon this war with the current destruction.
And he redefines heroism.
Yes. He says the real heroes are France and Belgium and Serbia, who shine as the heroic lands, those resisting invasion.
But even amidst all this darkness, he finds hope.
He does. He sees the black fabric of war as threadbare. At 1,000 points, the light is shining through.
And his final vision.
It's this powerful sense of a presence nearby. He conceives of God as the captain of the world republic, still fighting alongside humanity. The book ends not in despair, but with this feeling of hope, peace, the sounds of mourning, of life continuing.
Wow. So this deep dive into the sources really traces an incredible arc. From that seemingly stable, quirky pre-war England,
Full of its funny little customs and underlying tensions,
through the absolute shock and horror of the war, the devastating personal losses,
to this profound internal struggle, questioning everything, wrestling with grief, philosophy, theology.
It's amazing how those specific details, the peas, the car ride, the hockey game, and Wilshire's coconuts stick with you. They paint that lost world so vividly.
And then the contrast with the raw letters from the front, the inefficiency critiques, the deep philosophical shifts.
You really get a sense of how this massive historical event impacted individuals on such a deep personal level. It's not just abstract history.
Exactly. You see how the catastrophe forces this total reevaluation of self, society, even the nature of God.
So what's the big takeaway? These sources show how catastrophe forces us to confront the foundations of our lives and beliefs. But also, maybe, how even in the darkest times, facing loss can lead to new understanding, a different kind of hope.
A hope found not in ignoring the darkness, but maybe in finding connection and meaning right there within the struggle.
It definitely leaves you thinking, how do the crises we face, personal or global, change our understanding? Where do we find our own threads of hope when things feel, well, threadbare?